immigration, these massive policy changes taking place. Should they apply to the US? Should they go? Is that a good experience?
The Trump administration is in the beginnings of its term and is trying to make headlines, and fellow students and peers outweighs the power of any government. Deportation, issues with visas, fear and repression are very, very real, but there seems to be some good energy fighting back right now, and I think that will.
What was your process like when you were applying to, Harvard and when you got in?
It's a challenge, and especially when you think about where you're coming from, right? You might not be used to American-style education. You might not be used to writing in the way that these professors expect to.
There's an interesting photo that I think you've shown in all of your seminars is with you and Barack Obama and about 100 other kids from the US. Can you speak a little bit about that? That was really fascinating.
Harvard is like such a far off dream for so many people. It's like, it doesn't feel like a real place.
Yeah. I have a very special guest here, Ben Sorkin. We're coming in from Delhi, which is really hot right now, but this is going to be an even hotter conversation.
Oh, yes, it will.
Yeah, about the US and a little bit about Ben's life and how his experience has been in India for the first time. This is brought to you by Rostrum Education. So look out for that. That's going to be something very interesting in the future. But before that, I would like to get your opinion on how your first experience in India has been.
Yeah, this has been a great first trip to India. I never really thought I would go to India. This was a surprise trip for me after getting connected with the team here at Rostrum. But it's been fantastic so far. Everyone's been super hospitable. The food has been great. The heat is a little much, but I kind of knew that going into it. And it's been fun to visit a few different cities, get to really meet people, spend time with them outside of our work. So it's been a good first trip. It's
been great having you here. And, just listening to you speak about the Ivy Leagues and the admission process in the US, it's such a daunting process. And when I worked with my students, I've always been scared, no, I have to do a US application. And that always feels like a lot of work, but it's such a fulfilling process in general. What was your process like when you were applying to, Harvard and when you got in, and how was your final 2 years or your final 4 years at how, before you got into Harvard? Can you speak a little bit about that?
My school consistently sent kids to Harvard, Yale, all the top schools. We had a very strong relationship with Cornell. So 10 kids would go to Cornell every year.
Right.
It felt very achievable. It wasn't necessarily what I was gunning for my first couple of years. I had family in Boston, so I knew I wanted to go to school in Boston. My freshman year, my dream school was Northeastern. My sophomore year, my dream school was Boston University. Then it was Tufts, and I was kind of set on Tufts. I actually really wanted to go there. I loved the small liberal arts. It was a bigger liberal arts college school. It kind of blended the resources of a research university, but still having kind of a close-knit feel. So on one hand, I kind of knew I really wanted to be in Boston. My dream Ivy by the time I was applying was Yale. I did the Yale Young Global Scholars Program now 10 years ago. So the program has gotten a lot bigger and more competitive since then. But it was an amazing opportunity. It was the first time I had really met a lot of people outside of New York or outside of where I was from. And with all that global talent, the liberal arts, experience, getting to live in the dorms at Yale for 2 weeks, it really made me want to hustle and really put in a lot of effort into my senior year. I had a lot of kind of political experience. That was sort of my focus in high school. I did some theater, I did some film stuff. I had a lot of leadership roles within my school. And, I shot my shot at all the best schools. And Harvard was kind of one of the last places I applied to. I had toured as a junior on that same trip as Tufts. I saw Tufts in the morning and I loved it, but I still had my Harvard tour in the afternoon. So I was a little bit, I kind of made up my mind at that point already. And it was a rainy day when I visited. Harvard is Harvard. So I didn't think much of it actually being a possibility. So I applied to Harvard on my birthday, which is December 29th for good luck. But I really only did it because my mom made me.
Okay.
I had other schools that I was more excited about, but I figured, if I'm going to put in a couple Ivy apps, Harvard is the one to throw one into. And I think that's where my path differs from some students is it was a regular decision application. Yeah. It wasn't, top of mind for me necessarily. And, things kind of worked out really, really nicely. I had a very strong interview a couple of weeks after I had applied. the people I connected, the interviewer I connected with, like I got a really positive impression from. I did not get into Yale, but when I opened my decisions, I had opened them. I was saving Yale for last. So the second to last school I opened was Harvard, and I didn't get into the first two Ivies I applied to, Penn and Dartmouth. The Yale decision did not go my way, but at that point, who cares, right?
Yeah.
I had gotten Harvard, and it's funny to kind of look back on now the things that led to that decision, and I certainly wasn't making really, really intentional choices for Ivy League schools, but I was in a culture of students who were all working hard and hustling, and I was certainly prepared for top schools. I'd gotten into one of my earlies that I was really excited about, Notre Dame at the time. So I kind of thought I was set, I didn't have to worry a lot, and it was very fortuitous that things kind of worked out the way that they did. But, when you look back on it, it's luck, but it's also proper planning and preparation, right? That's where luck comes in, is in the last moment, right? If you don't have the foundation, the luck is not going to go your way at the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, opportunity is sometimes, luck and hard work. So you already had a little bit of the hard work put in and that luck came in and then you got that opportunity.
Exactly.
There are a couple of things that I'd like to double click on in that conversation. So something that a lot of students go through is this journey of, okay, ninth, this is what I want. This is where I want to go. Next year, okay, I read a little bit more about another university. This is where I want to go. The third year, another university. Maybe I'm doing a summer school. I really like the campus like you did. And then I want to go here. And then in the fourth year, and they apply to, 10 to 12 schools in the US. Yeah. You sort of have a very different opinion by the end of it of where you want to go. And I think that is such an important aspect of things, to have that journey of going from one school to another. I think that sort of builds your idea and perception of where you would like to go.
It's good to have a guiding North Star, but to fall in love with any one of these schools is kind of counterproductive.
Yeah.
They're all fairly similar, especially when you're applying from abroad. For you, it's such a big move to go to the US anyway. Shoot your shot at as many of them as you can and land at the one that you feel best about afterwards. But you're right. Yeah, the trends have changed quite a bit. And I wish people would look a little bit more broadly. In my final months, right before, really, truly the month before early decision was due, I had almost changed my mind and almost ED'd to Bowdoin College after a visit, which is a very different kind of school. It's 1,800, 2,000 undergrads. So it was the size of my high school, like a little bit bigger. But I'd never considered liberal arts colleges. I wasn't thinking about Williams or Pomona or Middlebury until I had gone to visit Bowdoin. And then I really was like, wait a minute, am I sold on this? Is this what I want? And thankfully I did an early decision, so I still had the options. Right. But I also think I would have loved that experience. And I think more and more students should consider those schools, even if the name brand further away from the US might not be as strong. Everybody who went to one of those schools of my peer group seemed to be really, really happy there.
But just people just don't know about them. So they're just sort of gone under the radar, but you should definitely have a couple of them in your college list, especially as an international student when you're applying to them. And so, and something that I realized throughout this process is that parents are also kind of involved in it. It's like you were saying that your mother was like, you should apply to Harvard as well. And I'm sure she also asked you to apply to a couple more. That I think is a good thing. And I used to find that I didn't really like that because I'm like, I've already researched these schools. I've spoken to the kid. He understands it. He likes these schools. We're fixated on it. What was it like, when you were applying to these universities?
My parents took a kind of hands-off approach, which was very fortunate for me. My mom drove me to tours, and I think that's an area where you really need to, your parents are going to help you with the discovery process as much as possible. And I think that their perspective as employers, as employees, right? They understand, at least from when they were when they were starting out their career, the value of a certain degree or what they wish they had done in that way, and trying to inform students' choices. But yeah, I was quite lucky that I got to kind of make a lot of my own choices, and my parents were kind of really supportive either way. But then there's also, you have your own internal kind of expectations of what you need to be doing for your parents. Your parents will say one thing, and then there's also I need to make them happy with this, or I need to be doing this for them in the future, right? So that's also a piece of it. Even if there isn't overt pressure, I think students should keep their parents in mind. And I have students who actually, very recently I worked with students who got into their parents' legacy school, chose not to go there, and then down the road are actually applying to transfer and very strongly considering, the place that was a legacy parent option. So, make the right choice for you in the moment, but know that other people have your best interest in mind as well.
Absolutely. And something that you touched upon was the school counselor and how important the school is. What was your experience in school like, and what were you doing exactly that sort of made Harvard think that this is the right guy for our program?
Yeah, absolutely. So like student leadership roles were a big part of my extracurricular record. I'd been in student government all 4 years of my high school experience in a variety of roles. And I actually think that played to my advantage. So I was president 1 year, I was vice president another year, I was secretary another year. So I really tried my hand at a lot of different experiences. And I think that there was some interesting sort of texture in that. I did a lot of theater. Theater was kind of my primary activity. So I did our fall musical and our spring musical. At my school, the fall show is an original. And so the summer before, when I was an 11th grader and 12th grader, I was involved in the creative process. And so it turned, there's the leadership of being in a lead role, but there's also the opportunity to help shape and really take on a leadership role behind the scenes. That was really appealing and attractive to me. I did a lot of film and creative things. So my school had a TV set. I took, classes in that. I was involved in creating film content as part of school. But really it was a lot of, I think, little leadership roles, right? So I was on my school's leadership team, which is a parent, administrator, and student kind of, not a governing body, but a group that works on policy in the school. My school had a health and fitness week, which is a week dedicated to, of course, promoting health and fitness. And I served on a board of students from multiple schools that met to address kind of local issues in the city school system. And having been selected for a really kind of elite student government and politics program my final year, I think was really kind of the differentiating factor, where, many of the students who received that award also went on to top schools. And I think that's been a lot of the advice I've been trying to share with students here this week is local, city, state, national, international recognition opportunities are some of that filtering mechanism for the top schools, because every school has a valedictorian, every school has a student body president. But when you're applying to places like the Ivy League and top 20 schools, you're competing on a global level, not just within your school. And so finding ways to differentiate yourself in a broader context makes the selection process for those schools a little bit easier for them to see where the real talent and potential is.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, there's an interesting photo that I think you've shown in all of your seminars is with you and Barack Obama and about 100 other kids from the US. Can you speak a little bit about that? That was really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a little, I'm trying not to brag, but it is a kind of cool activity. And we got invited to Washington, D.C. for a week. We received a financial scholarship as part of that. And the White House visit was a pretty special part of that experience. And yeah, that photo has made its rounds around India. Everyone has seen me, 20 feet away from Barack Obama, but in the same photo as Barack Obama. And some of my best friends for life came out of that program. My college roommate at Harvard was one of my friends from that program. That was probably the crowning sort of accomplishment in my application. But it came very late. I was selected for that December of my senior year.
All right.
So I'd gotten into my early action schools without it. And I made sure everybody knew I had won it when I applied regular decision, but I didn't get into any of the other Ivies I applied to. So it's never going to be just one thing that does it for you.
I know that's quite cool. And it sort of makes me pivot towards your sort of life, because you were discussing your college roommate that you met at this event as well. And so what was it like? What was your first day at Harvard like when you went there? Was it daunting? Did it induce anxiety? Did it feel like, oh my God, where am I? Or what was the feeling? What were your first thoughts when you were there?
Yeah, I think the transition to college academics is usually what people are most worried about. Yeah. I felt very lucky to have gone to a very rigorous school. And so I certainly wasn't worried about the academics, but the pace of life is so different, especially when you in high school wake up at 6 a.m., spend 8 hours in school, do homework do an extracurricular, then do homework for 5 hours. Like at Harvard, I think my freshman year, I had 13 or 15 contact hours. So that's 13 or 15 hours of class per week, right? And the rest of the time is time you have to yourself. You know, my psych course met for an hour and a half twice a week. My seminar met for 3 hours once a week. Like that's it. So you have to sort of build, you go from being a kid to being an adult very, very quickly. You know, you only eat lunch if you make time for and you get to lunch, right? So I think that piece was definitely something to navigate. The academics were like amazing, and I really enjoyed getting to make my own choices about what I study. I didn't have a lot of flexibility in high school.
And so what would you say to, or what advice would you give to, you know, freshmen who are coming into, you know, the Ivies or tier 1 universities, or for that matter, any university, you know, US, UK, wherever? What would be your advice to them in your first year?
I think the like overarching message, and especially having worked in residential life, during graduate school and after graduate school, I lived in the dorm with freshmen at Harvard. So I served in a kind of, you know, shepherding capacity to try and impart, you know, that wisdom and how to navigate this place. The biggest thing I would say is to like give yourself some grace. This is a fresh reset. You're in a new, for international students, you're in a new country, right? But even if you're not, it's a new city, it's a new school, it's a new set of academics, new people. And I think a lot of students are really hard on themselves when they don't get it instantly. Their first exam doesn't go the way they want it to. They didn't choose their courses properly the first semester and they're not super happy. You know, your first semester, you're actually taking an extra class called Figuring Life Out, right? Figuring out how to do college. And so I'd always meet students who are like, I'm going to go join 7 clubs and I'm going to go take an extra class. And I was like, you know, take a minute to adjust. Even if you are the go-getter, and that's the problem is everybody at Harvard or Yale or wherever it is, like has been really good at everything they've done their whole life, because that's how you get to a place like that. And they've, you know, learned how to get by on 4 hours of sleep, and they've learned how to cram, you know, a week's worth of content into their brain very quickly. And that's not the purpose of college. And when you are not so good at it instantly, it's a challenge. And especially when you think about where you're coming from, right? You might not be used to American style education. You might not be used to writing in the way that these professors expect of you. You might not be used to managing your time like that. So definitely like give yourself some grace, take it slow, and know that college, the version of yourself that you will be your second semester, your second year, your third year, your fourth year is going to be a new, you really grow up a lot in 4 years in university. And so don't be so hard on yourself. Don't have such high expectations, and like enjoy it, like soak it up. One of the big problems at Harvard is that students never explore Boston, even though Harvard is a 10-minute train ride away and is, you know, the Boston is very accessible. But suddenly your world becomes very small in university. It's the walk from my dorm to my classes. There are some dorms at Harvard that are like, you know, 5 minutes further away than the others. And everyone's like, oh, if you end up living there, then your life is over because you're so far away from everyone else. So, you know, I tell students, like take advantage of take advantage of being there, take advantage of the experience, especially for international students, you know. It's a new place, like you should explore it. I probably shouldn't, like it would have limited my post-grad options in a way that you don't think about when you're a student there. The program I had intended to have that scholarship fund, I was accepted to anyway 4 years down the road and won other funding for. It's good to keep in the back of your mind, but it shouldn't influence. You should really stay open to what's available to you. And some of the best courses I took were random classes that someone once mentioned to me. And some of the best academic experiences I had were kind of spur of the moment, you know, decisions. So while it's interesting and helpful marginally to keep a loose plan, like Harvard and any other top tier school is going to throw so many things in your way that you don't even know these opportunities exist if you're closed off to them, because it's not going to get me into a Harvard Business School one day, or it's not going to get me to, you know, Stanford, you know, law school. You're going to pass them up and really miss out on wonderful things. So I'm very grateful I lost the Truman, and I'm glad I met the person who introduced it to me, and I've achieved the goals I wanted to through that. But I wish I hadn't let it color so much of the first year and second year of my college experience.
Yeah, no, that's so fair. And I remember, you know, just taking courses which are random and really having a great impact on you. In my undergrad, so I was studying at a liberal arts college in India. So first experience for me. First time someone's telling me you can go pick your courses, pick your classes, and that was great. So that's something that I want to sort of touch up upon as well, is that you took sociology, but I remember you telling me that you had to take a maths course, you had to take other courses as well. So can you just speak a little bit about this liberal arts structure at Harvard, and is that something similar at other sort of big universities in the US as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say most of the top schools follow liberal arts kind of idea. Some are more true to it than others. So you'll find at some universities, liberal arts just means you have a 1 math class requirement to fill and a 1, social science requirement to fill. And at others, you'll find that it's a little bit maybe more restrictive, but more beneficial in that you are forced into more of that coursework. So Harvard has a general education program where students have to take 4 courses across the 4 content categories, right. STEM, social science, arts and humanities, and the 4th one is like a data requirement, working with data. And then the other 4 classes in the Gen Ed curriculum of 8 are courses built for Gen Ed. So right. The categories are, ethics and civics, institute history, societies and individuals, and the other 2 are evading me. And those are courses specifically built with a general education interdisciplinary right. method in mind. And so that actually was the program I taught in as a graduate student. And afterwards, for a year, I taught in the Gen Ed program. So I really got a taste of it. And, those were probably the most fun courses. I think students sometimes detest being forced to study a subject they don't want to or isn't related to their major. But I think that exposure to different topics is huge. So you'll see it across the Ivy League. There's some version of you must explore other subjects. Even the social science majors have some kind of a little bit of a math requirement most of the time. But it really is a huge advantage because it forces you to look outside of what you think you're interested in. The sooner you explore those, the more opportunity you have to maybe switch your major or add a minor that you would have never thought about. But I really am such a big fan of the liberal arts system, even if my math class was torture. I waited till my senior year to do it, so I hadn't used math for 3 years, and that's why it was especially difficult. But you'll find a version of it in most places, unless you enroll at a more specialized school, right? So places that have divisions instead of one college for undergrads. Penn comes to mind, right? If you're at Wharton in Penn studying business, you may have less of a liberal arts focus to your education. But I think it's a great thing to seek out. And one of my favorite classes was the science class I had to take, even though I didn't expect to really enjoy it. Yeah.
And so even at Penn, so for example, you're studying business at Penn. Mm-hmm. Are you sort of allowed to take courses outside the business school as well? And is there like a prerequisite requirement? Do you need to take AP examinations or something along those lines? Or is that something free for all?
Yeah, it'll depend on each school. But at most of the top schools, you will have flexibility to at least explore courses in other areas. There's always going to be preference for students who are within that unit. There's going to be a preference for students who are within that major.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And, maths is something that scares a lot of students in general. So when it comes into the core activity of things, then people get a little, do I need to do it? What is calculus? Why do I need to do this? So it's a very fair point.
In the US, 50% of students change their major at least once, and something like 25 or 30% change it twice. Right. So you should lean into that uncertainty.
That's a damning statistic for
people.
It
is. But it goes to, your world is so small at 17. Yeah. Right. Then you get to college and suddenly your world is a little bigger.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And you loved Harvard so much that you decided to stay on for a little bit longer for your postgrad as well. And then eventually worked there as well. So what made you choose, and you were there for about 10 years? That's what
I applied 10 years ago. I was at Harvard for 6 years total.
Right.
Which is a long time.
Yeah. So how was that? And you said that you were living with freshmen, from being a freshman and then living with freshmen as a separate story. What made you choose Harvard again and, wanting to do educational leadership as a program, or what made you choose or move towards this sort of space?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of applied to graduate school at the time I did because of the circumstances around COVID. Graduate schools were not requiring the GRE when I was applying, and I didn't know how long that would last. So I worked for 2 years in admissions. I taught my first course because it was a professor I'd had in undergrad, and I had taken 4 of her classes. So I was, I love this woman, and she was kind of one of my intellectual role models. And I did it just because I wanted to spend more time with her. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm really good at teaching and I really enjoy this part of the work. And it inspired me to teach in 3 more courses at Harvard afterwards. So you get a different taste of the school in whatever way you do it. And I think that's something people should know about applying to graduate school in the US is Harvard is not Harvard in graduate school. It's its own thing, right? But Harvard Business School has a very unique culture from the rest of the institution. And Stanford Law is not Stanford undergrad, right? They're very different experiences. And so students should know that going into it. And there's a right time to go to graduate school. And I don't know if 2 years out in education is the right time. Right. And I think that there's a similar calculus to be made for business school and for law school and a master's. And I think you do yourself a disservice going into a master's straight out of undergrad and not getting work experience, not getting a taste of living outside of a campus context. I'm a big proponent of waiting a little bit for most people.
There's a great piece of advice for students who are looking to immediately finish off with their masters. It's not a thing to finish off. It's a thing to sort of savor and figure out and then sort of go ahead with it.
And just to that point, getting a break from work feels really good. Yeah. But if you've never worked, then you know, when you go to graduate school, everybody relishes like, oh, all I have to do is read a book instead of, write a report, well, you're still writing reports, but it's a different kind of work. And so definitely work for a couple of years because then you'll really enjoy not working for a year or 2 or whatever.
I definitely appreciate reading a book more than opening an Excel sheet and doing anything on an Excel sheet. I think I hate Excel more. It saves my life on a daily basis, but I don't want to open an Excel and like, I have to input this formula to figure out this. I don't want to do it. Either way, but, so did the experience at grad school at Harvard sort of push you towards making the decision of becoming a career counselor, or was there an epiphany of sorts, or was it just sort of happenstance? You just happened to just started doing counseling because of your experiences. Where did that switch come from eventually?
Yeah. When you go to an elite school, there are just so many opportunities to do part-time essay editing, volunteer counseling. So I've done a little bit of it throughout undergrad and throughout working. Everyone values your opinion because you're somebody who's gotten in, you've figured it out. So, that is an easily accessible kind of opportunity for you. So it's always been in the back of my mind. I tutored, my high school had an entrance exam. I tutored for that exam when I was in high school. So it was always in the background. But it was during graduate school that I worked part-time for a consulting company that had reached out to me. It wasn't something that I had sought out. And over the course of working for them for a year, I saw kind of a new pathway that I'd never thought before. I never imagined working for anything other than a school or a nonprofit program. And I saw that I got a lot of the benefits that I still really enjoyed of working with students, making a difference, using my knowledge and experience to help others, while also, getting to have a little bit more flexibility in my own life. And I really enjoyed that year and slowly started to build my own kind of experience and profile in this world after that. So I stayed at Harvard for a year after graduate school, and I was living with students, I was teaching, and I was also gaining experience and working with more and more students in this field over that time and seeing my students' success, seeing how much I enjoyed the work. You can't do counseling with students until they come home from school. So I had my mornings to myself. I'm not a morning person very much. It really kind of checked a lot of the boxes for me. And just seeing A, that I was good at it, and B, how grateful students are for that support, put me on this path of doing counseling work kind of full time.
What do you say? What would you recommend to the parents and the kids who are seeing this podcast? Should they apply to the US? Should they go? Is that a good experience? From what I've heard till now, it's a great experience. So can you just sort of speak about that a little bit as well?
International students are core to higher education in America. And administrators, professors, peers love the international students that make up our community. And so to be dealing with an administration that is contrary to that belief and doesn't perhaps fully understand the value and the contribution of international students to American campuses is quite disheartening as a counselor and as someone who was living with international students just a couple of years ago. And so I will say that I think this moment is fleeting. I think the power of higher education and the power of educators, right, and fellow students and peers outweighs the power of any government. And so I hope that this will pass. I'm confident that we will start to see more and more coalition building and support for international students. The support has always been there from the schools and from the people who interface with international students. But there seems to be some good energy fighting back right now, and I think that will continue. The challenges facing international students, right, deportation, issues with visas, fear and repression, are very, very real, but are also affecting a pretty small minority of students. The emotional damage and toll, I think, is high on everybody. But for parents that are concerned, I think this moment will pass. The school year will be out in a month. The Trump administration is in the beginnings of its term and is trying to make headlines and do good on some of its promises. But I think some of the resistance we're seeing is a positive indicator that the tide will turn. And I think for students who are about to leave, there is a little bit more of a calculus there. But for younger students who are considering whether or not to make the effort of being a candidate for U.S. colleges and universities, should still be on that pathway and know that even if it isn't over in a couple of months, right, there's only, this is his last term. These are the final years of the Trump presidency. And I think that we will really see the value and appreciation and respect for international students bounce back in this moment.
Right. Well, that's a very fair point. And for the students that will get motivated and would want to apply to the US, what would be your advice in terms of how they should go about the application process? There are, I think, around 4,000 colleges in the US. Obviously, not everyone is looking at all of them, but still, making a choice between 30 really good colleges is a tough thing. And then each of them are equally competitive sometimes. So how do you sort of build a profile, or how do you prepare for applying to these programs, and how early should you start? I know I've asked you a bunch of questions
in that one question.
Yeah, but it because there are so many factors applying to the US. UK is very straightforward. Australia is very straightforward. Singapore is very straightforward. US has a little bit more that they ask, and I think that's perfectly fair because you don't actually get to interact with the admissions officers, and the only way they get to actually understand who you are is through your essays and everything. So what would be the best way to sort of start looking at the Ivies or tier 1 universities in the US, and what should students do if they are planning to go to the US to be able to be competitive in these programs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is building a strong academic foundation, right? So doing well in the courses you've chosen, choosing challenging and difficult courses, and really starting to flesh out like what it is that you're interested in. It's not a requirement to have a clear pathway academically, but the students that do figure it out sooner, or at least identify what they like and what they enjoy, are able to tailor themselves a little bit more. You don't have to be making every single choice with college in mind at 9th grade, but you certainly should have some sense of it in the back of your mind, right? You cannot become a competitive candidate overnight. It is a long process to build those profile pieces. So I'd encourage students to start kind of as early as they can. Build a strong academic foundation, do well in your courses with whatever curriculum you have. Start preparing for the SAT sooner rather than later, right? But when it comes to the extracurriculars, like, you need the longevity because they are looking for sustained involvement, but you also need the longevity to see what you're good at and advance to positions of leadership and have impact, because people who want to be a leader on day one don't know the organization. They don't know the work. They don't know, what the purpose of this involvement is really all about. They're not always as clear in every extracurricular. And that spike is also partially about the story that you tell. Right. Because again, you can be an international science fair winner and still not get in because you have nothing to say about it, or because it hasn't shaped you beyond becoming a line item on your resume. And I think students, they want the student who's going to take advantage of it. Not the student who feels like they've earned it, not the student who feels like they deserve it. And they also want somebody who's going to use that opportunity for good in the world, for changing things, right? To not just preserve the status quo. So keep that in mind, right? Yes, they want talented students, but they want people who are in it for good or the right or unique reasons. Yeah. No, that's so true. And that's a great point to sort of end this conversation. And this has been a really wonderful conversation. I hope to be back. I hope people will stick around on the Rostrum socials and follow and subscribe and keep up with our content. And next time we'll have much more to talk about, I'm sure.